Hello, everybody, and welcome to my leadership series. I'm Elizabeth Suarez, a leadership and negotiation strategist who works with organizations, executives, and professionals to enhance leadership, negotiation, and conflict resolution skills, resulting in a more profitable, inclusive, and productive workplace. The intent of this leadership series is to spotlight industry leaders from across the world on their managerial style and leadership experience. In today's video, I'm spotlighting Ted Rubin. He is the CMO of Photify, the easiest content creation application available for the iOS system. He's also a leading social media strategist who has established well-known hashtags such as hashtag R on R, which means return on relationship, and also the hashtag no let up. So with that, I want to welcome Ted and thank you for being here.
Well, my pleasure. I'm really happy to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. So I have been looking forward to this interview because I know you are extremely opinionated, and I know that you have had multiple decades of experience in organizations, but as well as a strategist, a visionary. And that's what I want to talk to you today concerning social media and leadership. So let's go ahead and start. And I want to first start to get my audience to know a little bit more about you. So share with us, where were you raised? What college did you go to? And what did you study while you were there?
Well, I was raised in Long Island.
Okay.
And it was, I'm 63 years old. So this was back, my being raised was really in the 60s. So it was a very different time. I was raised by first generation Americans. My grandparents emigrated from Poland, basically really escaped Poland right at the beginning of or right before World War II. And I was brought up in a very different world. It was a community world. It was like, if you look at our social media pages now, we kind of lived in them back then. You knew your neighbors, people would drive by and say hello. People weren't as fearful as they are now. Everyone likes to say that the world is a much more dangerous place. It actually isn't. It's actually a lot safer place, except now we hear about all the bad things happening everywhere, that it sounds like things are a lot more dangerous. So we insulate our kids. We don't let them cross the street. I mean, I remember... I can't tell you I remember exactly what grade it was, but it was probably second grade, which means I was about 6 or 7 years old. And you got your first chance to walk to school by yourself. And your parents would follow in their car a few blocks back. And every kid knew that their parents were back there. And they were watching. They weren't really watching to protect you. They were watching to make sure that you looked both ways before you crossed the street, that you were paying attention to what you were doing. It was a very different world. Of course, now I've spoken so much, I don't remember everything you asked me, but I think you asked me where I went to college.
Yes. Where did you go to college and what did you study?
Well, like you, I went to Cornell.
Go Big Red.
Yeah, go Big Red. So I lived in another kind of insulated world because, we were up in the country. We were on a real campus, as people, some people don't see as much. I mean, they're still out there, but we didn't go to a city school. I studied economics and business. I started out going to college expecting to study political science and go to law school until I realized that I didn't like to study that hard. And look, one of the things I look back on, you know how your mom says to you, you're going to regret this one day. One of the things she said to me was, you're going to regret not reading more. And they tried to push me to read more, but I was very active. I was in sports. I was outside all the time. And the reading overwhelmed me when I got to Cornell. I was a top student. I was top 5 in a class of 1,000 in high school. School came very easy to me. And well, first of all, I got to a university where everybody was as smart or smarter than me. So it was a very different world. But truth be told, the ability to read quickly held me back. And it's one of the, I have a very difficult relationship with my ex-wife. I had to fight to keep my daughters in my life. But I will tell you, the one major gift she gave to my daughters is that she built a love of reading into them. And my younger daughter is now at Harvard Law School and graduated with honors from University of Pennsylvania and with a master's in 4 years. And I would say a big part of that is because of her reading skills.
That's
You know,
cool. Wow.
the fact that she could read through Harry Potter books in 2 or 3 nights when she was a kid, it empowered her when
Mm.
she got to school. And instead of being intimidated by all this reading, she embraced it. And, again, back to our conversation at the beginning here, um, I'm an audio learner. I'm very good at learning when I'm in person, when I'm in places. But at Cornell, I also didn't have mom waking me up every morning, making sure I went to class. I missed probably more classes than I should have. But what I will tell you is it gave me a base for, I've tried to leverage a lot of that now. I'm always learning. I'm always reading. One of the things I've tried to make the pandemic pay for me is because I'm not traveling like I used to. I have a lot more time,
Mhm.
and I'm reading, and I've also really gotten into audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
It's been
Yeah,
great because I can multitask. Because I
mhm.
work out a lot, I walk a lot, I kayak, I bike ride, and now I never do those things unless I'm either on a call, connecting and engaging with people, or I'm listening to audiobooks. And it's more than doubled my ability to get through reading. So I'm reading as well. And there's certain books I like to read, but there's others I like to listen to. And it's incredible how much you can absorb doing that.
So you said that you love to read now. I mean, you're doing that with, and you're multitasking it with all these activities. So with your experience and your educational experience, your experience after you graduated from Cornell, and now the life that you're leading with all these audiobooks and everything, tell me in one or two sentences, how would you define leadership?
I like to say that a true leader inspires.
Okay.
People naturally follow leaders. When
Hmm.
looking at an organization, I look to see who people are emulating. I don't look at the titles as much. I mean, obviously, we have to at times, because especially if we're looking to connect into an organization or we're looking to get something done within that organization, a hierarchy is very important. But
Hmm.
I always, in meetings, I'm the one that's watching. I want to see who people are looking at. I want to see who they're paying the most attention to when they're speaking. Leaders don't preach. They lead by example.
Yes.
Now, I often warn those I mentor, and my mentorship is also very different. I don't take on a direct mentee mentor relationship for the most part. It's often just by example, by the content I share, by the engagement I create through that content, and by my accessibility, because I always give out my phone number, my email. I tell people to reach out anytime, and I always tell them to stay away from those who manage with fear and believe leadership is about control, because I don't think you can lead with control.
Okay.
And I always advise those people, especially when they're younger, because obviously the younger we are, the more opportunity we have ahead of us, and usually the more flexibility we have. Is if
Mhm.
you're in a situation like that, leave those kind of leaders when you can, and
Okay.
and build your voice and brand by the actions you take.
Okay. So this is a great segue to the next question that I wanted to ask you, and it was concerning what we have lived in this past year of 2020, this pandemic, and also the social unrest that has been happening. And I know you and I currently live in the United States. So, as a highly regarded social media and content strategist that you are, what is your opinion on the subject of inclusion in the workplace?
Um, Elizabeth, can you define how you see or are referring to inclusion? Are you referring to diversity?
That's a good question. So that's what I will ask you. How would you define inclusion, and how and what role does social media play with that? So that's a great question to answer.
Okay, I love getting asked a question when I ask a question. So,
Exactly. I'm doing my job, am I?
so look, first of all, I think inclusion and diversity are somewhat two sides of a coin.
Okay.
I don't think they're necessarily one and the same. Diversity obviously is having different voices,
Mhm.
is having different people from different walks of life, people of different races, different different lifestyles.
Mhm.
Um, Again, a lot of that depends on the business you're in and your product. And when I say that, I mean the real strong need for diversity is in play more in certain types of companies than others. But I
Mhm.
think the value is always there. Inclusion to me, at least what that word means to me, is including people in the process of building, defining your brand, how you operate your business. Being open to listening to those around you.
Okay.
I think there's a very different world out there now.
Yes.
Your employees watch your leadership style and they take cues from it. If they never hear a word from the C-suite outside the executive office, or if they feel there is a disparity between your
Mhm.
stated values and what you actually do, watch out. And social media plays a big part in that, because that word, that information spreads so much faster now, whether it's in particular groups within your company or it's just in general. I mean, it's hard to rally the troops, and rallying the troops can be very important, especially now during this kind of a time, like during a pandemic, when
Mhm.
you need people to stand up and stand out. It's very difficult to do that if they don't feel connected to you or your ideals. Leaders who truly inspire their employees, like I said, lead by example. They're personable, they're accessible, and employees feel they can trust them. Do more of that, and you're don't do or do more of that, and you're likely, to keep to be in high regard from your employees. And when you're in high regard from your employees, they tend to listen to you more. I think very often leaders give too much thought to what they think their brand is or what they want it to be, and not enough time listening to those around them and what they think. And I think inclusion plays a very big part in that. I like to say that your brand or your business is what you do. Your reputation is what people remember and share.
Oh, that's powerful. I really like that. That is so true.
So you can say, I'm about anything. I'm Ted Rubin. I believe in being good to people. I'm very open. I answer all requests for information. I'm very responsive to people. But then if I'm not, it doesn't matter that I said it. And then the opposite also is true. I don't have to say what my brand is. Your followers, your employees, the people that know you will speak out for what your brand is. I can't tell you how many times I'll overlook something in social media. I have a lot of incoming, and we all have a lot of incoming now, right? At one point when I was in my 50s, I'm 63 now, like I said, I started thinking, oh my God, am I going senile? I don't remember like what I walked into the room for. And then I realized that the kids in their 20s who were working for me were doing the same thing, because there's just so much incoming. We have multiple devices. We have emails. We have social media accounts. We have text messaging. Or for some of us, we even still answer our phones. Here, I do, and we can lose track
Mhm.
of those things. But so every once in a while, I'll miss something. Someone will ask me a question, although they make a very strong statement. They'll expect me to respond to it, and I don't. And someone will say, oh, Ted, you tell everybody that you're responsive and that's such an important part of what you do, and you didn't even answer me. And 9 times out of 10, before I even have a chance to respond, somebody else who's paying attention to that conversation socially will jump in and go, he must have missed it. Ted always responds.
Okay.
And I like to tell brands this, not just about their employees, but with their customers, that if you build a brand that people can trust, if you lead in an inspirational way, in a way that people trust what you're doing and know they can count on you and see that you're there all the time, when you miss things, your audience will step up and stand up for you. And
So
you
I
don't necessarily
So I
have to
have a
do it for
question for that
yourself.
concerning the brand, because I like how you define the brand and what the brand stands for. And also living through this pandemic that we're all living and the fact of social media. So can you share one example that you have seen through the pandemic that they worked correctly, their social media, in order to withstand the strong brand they had? Do you have an example that you can share with us about that, or
I
idea?
don't think I have. I think I have. I think there's a lot of examples of that.
Mhm.
I think that in general, um, people have stepped up. People have realized that they need to engage, that they need to show people what's going on. Like for a long time before this all happened, I would say that today's executive has to know what's going on in and around his or her company and the industry at all times. And the only way to do a good job of that is to learn to navigate the digital and social landscape and use those tools to listen, to learn, and to engage with people at every level. A big mistake I was seeing a lot from leaders that they were making too frequently was insulating themselves from the realities of business and everyday life. But the pandemic has forced many to fix a lot of this. Digital and social tools have become part and parcel of all of our realities now. I mean, I like to say that relationships are like muscle tissue. The more you engage them, the stronger and more valuable they become. Before the pandemic, many could allow themselves to believe they had or were building those relationships simply by being in the same building or at the same event as others. I mean, I can't tell you how many, and I'm going to call them managers. And let me back up for 1 second here and say that for the most part, many who are thought to be in leadership roles are actually simply managers.
Wow. Okay.
Managing is not leading. Now, don't get me wrong. Managing is important and valuable, but people follow and rally around leaders. People simply listen to managers, and if that's it. And so, like I said, before the pandemic, many could allow themselves to believe they were doing this. Like they would walk around the office, they would stick their head in the conference room, they would have a big company meeting, they would send out a weekly email. And to them, that was the engagement, that was the leading, that was the letting people know they're there. But now that's clearly impossible. I mean, there are very few businesses where somebody can walk around, and even if people are in some of the few businesses or offices they're in, people aren't walking around and patting them on the back and, and schmoozing around and sticking their head into meetings. So they must become more actively engaged using tools that they simply can't gloss over and assume people know they are there. I believe leaders and everyone who wants to connect with others need to be mindful of how they connect and the impact they make daily. And so during the pandemic, I think a lot of leaders that said, oh, I don't need to do that, or social media is not for me, or, oh, that's just for people writing what they're having for lunch, have learned that it's an incredibly valuable way to communicate, that they can give a window into people of what you're doing with your life. It can show others that you're stuck at home just like they are. And sure, you might live in a bigger house, but you've got that same chair and that same desk with that same background, that they're working under. And that probably 9 times out of 10, because most leaders are also human beings. They have families, they have kids. There's some kids screaming in the background. I mean, the dogs. I was in a meeting recently with a multi-billion-dollar company, and let me remember who it was. The COO was on the call, and all of a sudden his dog just went off. And he had to quiet it down the same way the basic employee had to do on a call. That doesn't happen in an office.
No, it doesn't.
That doesn't happen at an event when the leader comes in and he's got his entourage and he's got his things. Now all of a sudden he's home alone by himself, doing his job or her job.
Alert from
sorry about
Google
that.
password.
Right, and there it is. So an alert goes off my computer the same way it would on anybody else's. So I think what's happened now is, number one, is we've all been forced to start using these tools again, or for the first time. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm a typical example. I'm in a position where I'm pretty set in my ways. I mean, people think because I'm very big in social media and I use certain tools, but you know what? I love Twitter. I'm not changing it. I tried out TikTok just so I could try it out so I'd understand it, but I don't love TikTok. I don't love Snapchat. I use the things I do. I never did a Zoom before this, and I won't tell you that there weren't times where my business partner or someone else said, hey, let's jump on a Zoom. Could you handle it? And I'm like, No, you do it. I'll get on it. Or my business partner knows that if he he's the CEO of Photify, and if he uses some new kind of software and we have to fill out something to follow up on sales calls, I'm not going to do it. Like you got to have someone do it for me. But all of a sudden now we're all learning how to do these things, and we're all trying these tools. And one of the biggest things I think people have learned is how effective people can be working remote. I mean, think about how many companies, by the way, all these tools were basically available a few
Before.
years ago.
Mhm.
But how many businesses said, "Oh, I don't want people working remote"? Or you'd find a great employee, excuse me, you want to hire, and you'd say, "Yeah, but she's in Maryland." And I know that the boss said they want someone here in the office, but I'm sure she could be great. And then it got turned down. Now everyone's learning that you don't have to be in the office. I mean, the world has changed and it's not going back. And
So,
I
so
Go
let
ahead.
me ask you about that, the post-pandemic, because that's the key thing that I wanted to conclude our discussion with, is this looking post-pandemic. And what you're saying is the world is not going to change back to what it was before March 1st, 2020. What do you see as some key opportunities that lie ahead for businesses when it comes to social media? I mean, what key opportunities lie ahead now post-pandemic? Hopefully, we can take this under control during 2021, and we can have this new life, whatever this new life is. What are key opportunities out there?
Well, that's kind of two different questions. So first, I'm going to jump into what you just said about social media,
Mm.
because it kind of intertwines with what we talked about before. One of the great things about social, whether it's LinkedIn, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, whatever, it's TikTok, is that
Mhm.
you get a view into the life of people, different than what you might see regularly. Now, we also all had a view into people's lives when we were all together in offices. And because they come in, you're tired. Oh, you look tired. Oh, I was out drinking last night, or I was with my family, or it was my daughter's birthday and we stayed up late watching movies. But you knew that because you were talking. Now all of a sudden we're not bumping into people at the water cooler. We're not, walking through the parking lot with people. We're not kind of hanging out and going out to lunch with people the same way. And by the way, to intertwine that with the second question, I think a lot of that's going to continue. I think there's going to be a lot of remote people working remote. A lot of office space is never going to go back to being filled up because people have learned how effective we can be. And the beauty of social media in that respect is you get a view into people's lives. You can share stuff. And yes, you can mold it the way you want. My opinion, what I tell people is I give it all up. I want people to know who Ted Rubin is. I want them to know when I'm sad about my daughters. I want them to know when I'm excited about something else I did. I want them to know when I'm working out. I want to inspire them by letting them know that, yeah, I look like I'm in great shape and you think I can do stuff all the time, but I wake up every morning like everybody else finding excuses of why I don't have to do it today. And like I say, just start, because then you get going. But I like to share that because that gives people, I was working remote a lot before all this started, and that gave people a view into who I am. Plus, a lot of the work I do is with people that I never see. I create content for companies. I work with people remotely. People read what I post. Now they know that it's not just some guy sitting behind a computer typing something. It's Ted who just got up from his conversation with Elizabeth and did 10 push-ups, because I live by this thing called what you can when you can, where you work out all throughout the day and you don't have to worry about getting to the gym. So I think that's really important. As far as how the world's going to change, I think we've had a lot of realizations. People can be effective, or maybe even more effective, working from home. I can tell you at Photify, we're never going back to our office. We
Oh,
are more effective. People are working harder. People will jump on their computer anytime when they have to do something. A lot of times, offices really promoted the 9 to 5 mentality. Now, sometimes people put in too much time, but the beauty of it being at home is I can set it aside for dinner. I can read to my kids before they go to bed at night. I can, have that conversation with my grandparents or my parents and then get back to something I'm doing. I can have 5 meetings in a day with people all over the world, where before I was getting on planes and traveling. So our expenses have gone down for office space. Our expenses can go down for travel. I think events are going to be a major difference. I think events had gotten out of hand. There were events every single day, 5 in a city at a time. People were mostly going to party, and now people have realized that a lot of what was going on there can effectively be done for a distance, and tools are being developed. The technology was there. but tools are being developed. I recently spoke at an event where I was one of the keynotes, and after the keynote was over, there was a screen with tables, and you click on a button and you join that table, and people's pictures would pop up, and you'd have conversations with them the same way you would network, at an event. And it was pretty cool. And these things are just going to get better. So I think what it's done is it's allowing people, without hiding it, to have more of a life and still work hard and be able to achieve. So when my girls were young, I'm a divorced dad. I had very little leeway from my ex. My younger daughter knew I came to every one of her games. But a lot of times I would make up a story about where I was going or what I was doing. I would tell people that I was running to a meeting, but I'd really be going to my daughter's soccer game, because I would be, luckily, we had iPhones, we had other devices. In the earlier days, I had a BlackBerry, and I could do something. But now it's like, I got to run to my daughter's game. We can get back on Zoom when I get back in an hour, if that's okay. And I think a lot of that is going to make the way this world is expanding, and we're doing business all over the world, able to do it more from without that travel, without necessarily leaving our families, without the extra added expense and stress that goes with it. I am anxious to travel again, but I will tell you that I'm kind of enjoying not jumping on a plane every week, not stressing over, again, I don't just go places. I have to be on a stage. I've got to go to meetings. So I got to think about, what am I going to wear? What am I going to bring? What am I going to pack? And yes, I overly stress. So maybe I do know a lot of people that don't really care. They just throw shit in a suitcase. But, that's going to be less. And I think that's going to make life very different. And I think we don't have the answers to that yet. I think leadership has to start thinking about that, and they need to start including the people they're leading in helping them understand how best to do that in the future. How is that for bringing it all together?
Wow, I'm impressed. Okay, that is perfect, because we're actually running out of time, but I have one more question to ask you. And I love your transparency, and I love your your reality, like how real you are. That is something that more leaders need to be like you. Like, I mean, I've learned so much about you, not only professionally, but even personally during this conversation. So I have one more question. What would be the one key piece of advice you will give a younger Ted Rubin, a 22-year-old Ted Rubin graduating from Cornell University? What would you tell him?
Don't give up as quickly as you might.
Okay.
One of my regrets is that I let things go too soon. And very often I think sometimes you have to let your emotions carry you a little bit more than your intellectual side. So, rather than evaluate it and say, I've only accomplished this so far, I'm not sure how much value it's going to have, don't give up so easily.
Okay.
I would give the advice I would give, which is something that I've always done. So that was something I regret not doing more. The other major piece of advice I would give is create relationships every step along the way.
Yes.
And then nurture those relationships. So if you don't mind me taking time for a quick story, but my daughters would always look at me and say, Daddy, you have so many friends. And I'd look at them always and I'd say, girls, I just want to make sure we're clear about something. It's not because I'm the greatest guy in the world. It's because I work hard at it. I don't worry about who calls who first. I am almost always the one that reaches out more often. And every once in a while, like anybody, I'll go, it'd be nice if somebody would reach out to me first. Truth be told, they do, but because I am so proactive at it that I do it so much more than others, that it makes that seem like less when it's really not. But build those. I have not been in one school, organization, job, anything without coming out of it with at least one relationship that I have maintained since I started it. And that takes work. That takes attention. It's the return on that relationship is tremendous. and try not to measure it. Like I like to say, do for others without expectation of anything directly in return, because it will come. My dad was the guy that used to drive down the street, and we'd be in neighborhoods where we didn't know anybody. There'd be a garbage can on the street. He'd pull over, he'd put the garbage pail back up in front of the house. And I look at him, I go, Dad, why'd you do that? And he goes, because the garbage pail's in the street and it's going to get wrecked and it's their garbage pail. And then as I got older, he made me get out of the car and do that. But he taught me. So I do that now. I will be driving in Florida in a neighborhood I don't know, even on a main road, and there's like a chair that somehow found its way in the middle of the road. I'm the one that stops, grabs it, and throws it on the side of the road. And I will tell you that it makes me feel good.
That's
So
good.
I do it, but almost always there's someone who reaches out and gives you a fist or claps their hand or says thank you. You know, step out, be someone's friend before they're your friend.
Wow, that's powerful. And you know what? I will promise you, Ted, I will reach out to you. I'll make sure of that because
I hope
you're
so.
Cornellian and so am I. So that will be my excuse. Now, if you ignore me, that's your problem. I'm
Now
just,
I'm gonna give one more piece of advice.
uh-huh.
I always thought of myself as a networker. Um, that I reach out to people, I connect with them. What I came to realize, and it was actually a friend who pointed it out to me, is that what I really am is a community builder. I bring my friends together. So please, if you're young, if you're starting out, if you're building relationships, bring your friends from all walks of life together. Bring your different groups together. There was something that many of the young people probably haven't heard of called Google Plus. It didn't last too long. It
Yeah.
was Google's attempt to open a social network. They
Mhm.
had a really great idea, but in my eyes, their culture and their mindset was not as a social company, but more as a search advertising company. So they didn't execute it well, but they had this concept of circles. And we all have different circles in
Mhm.
our lives. Some of them overlap, some of them live separately. Some of us have many of them, some of us have small of them. Do your best to build those circles and then sometimes overlap them and bring people together that might not otherwise be together. All my friends know each other. Matter of fact, many of my friends have become best friends in their own right. And I also, I love being around people like that because, like my business partner, I know all his friends. Now, granted, we've been together for a long time, but you would be surprised how often that doesn't happen. So, build relationships. Don't give up so easy, and be a community builder because a network gives you reach, but a community gives you power.
Wow.
Networks connect, communities care.
Wow, I can't say anything else. That's a beautiful way to finish this interview, Ted. I appreciate that. It is so important. It's not only about networking, but it's about community, which means you have to do nurturing. So, very wise words. I wish I would have known you when when I graduated from Cornell. I graduated a few years after you, but I wish I would have had somebody that said that to me. So, with that, I want to thank you for your time and all that valuable information you shared with all of us. I want to thank the people that are watching for watching this, and I welcome the feedback from anybody if they want to comment below to continue the conversation. In the meantime, I will tell everybody, see you next time. Nos vemos.